All right. Good morning, everyone. So we are recording now, and let's see where we stopped yesterday. So we are yet to prove the reverse direction of Tate's theorem. So in this direction, we know that the graph is three-edge colorable, and we want to somehow produce a four-face coloring, a proper four-face coloring of the graph. Right? And I gave you two do-it-yourself problems that we are going to find useful. Okay, so let's see. So consider a proper three edge coloring of the graph G. So G is a planar graph, plane embedding of a given graph, right? It's a plane graph. So we are going to look at the embedding and somehow give colors to the faces using this three edge coloring. So let's say the coloring is for each edge of the graph, it gives one of three colors, 1, 2, and 3. And I want you to think of 1 as being blue, 2 as being green, and 3 as being red. Okay, just for the sake of visualization. All right. And our goal is to construct a proper four face coloring of G. Okay. So it's not immediately clear how you would pull out four colors from three. So what we'll do is we'll look at the subgraph formed by two of these perfect matchings, right? So each color class forms a one regular spanning subgraph of G, right? And one regular spanning subgraph is nothing but a perfect matching. Okay, so what will happen if we take two of them at one time? So let Gij,
So if we take two of them at a time, we will get a two regular graph, right?
exactly. Let Gij denote the subgraph, the spanning subgraph formed by edges of color I or color J. Right? What I mean is, if I'm looking at G12, then I'm looking at all the vertices of the graph and all the edges that are blue or green. Right? So I'm looking at the union of the two. So note that Gij is a spanning two regular subgraph of G. Right? Because at every single vertex, you will have one edge from the color I and one edge from the color J. Right? So clearly each vertex will have degree 2 and therefore it is a spanning two regular subgraph of the given graph. Okay. Can anyone tell me what does a spanning two regular subgraph really look like?
So basically, it will be some cycles,
It's a bunch of cycles.
bunch of cycles.
It's
Okay.
a bunch of vertex disjoint cycles that cover all the vertices of the graph. In other words, this is simply a bunch of, it could be just one cycle if it is a Hamiltonian cycle, for example. But in general, it could be more cycles. A bunch of vertex disjoint
So, sir, every such cycle will correspond to a simple closed curve in the planar embedding of G.
That's right.
So
Exactly.
can we argue from this point of view? Now, if we consider the edges of grade and
Mm-hmm.
simply add this to this planar embedding,
Mm.
we know that now each phase is two colorable. And using those two colors, if we argue that we need at most two other colors,
Mm.
means basically whatever means in whatever fashion we are trying to add the edges,
Mm.
but we can do this coloring, face coloring using at most four colors. We don't need more than four color. Then it will be four face colorable. Means can we argue and then say
Okay. So you are considering one two regular subgraph. You are
yes,
getting a two-phase coloring,
two
and
face
then you are
coloring?
adding the remaining edges to somehow create a four-phase coloring.
Yes, exactly.
I
Yeah.
see. I see. There might be a way to do it or think of it that way. We are going to take a slightly different approach where we will consider two graphs, G12 and G23, and combine their two phase colorings to get a four phase color. But you might want to think about the alternative where you just take one of the two graphs, you get a two phase coloring, and then think about what happens when you add the last edges, the let's say the red colored edges.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, so that could be a way to complete the proof from that point of view. But I don't think they will be inherently different proofs. Inherently, they will be the same proofs. Okay. So so now let's look at one of these graphs, right? Let's say we look at G12. Now G12 is a spanning two regular subgraph of the given graph. Each vertex has degree 2. In particular, each vertex has even degree. It turns out we will use this weaker condition, the fact that each vertex has even degree. Okay? So, in particular, each vertex of Gij has even degree. Right? Just to be clear, here 1 less than equal to I less than j less than equal to 3. Okay? Good. So, so Gij is an even plane graph, right? Each Gij is an even plane graph. And that implies by this do it yourself problem that it is two phase colorable. So if you just look at the red and let's say the blue and green edges, then that subgraph you can color its faces using two colors. By do it yourself problem number 2, each Gij is two phase colorable. Okay, good. Let's take one quick example to see what's going on. Let's say this is our graph G, and let me take three perfect matchings here. So blue, let's say these are my blue edges. Okay, that's one perfect matching. Let's say now I want to look at the green edges. So let's say these are my green edges. Okay, and finally the red edges. Okay, let me look at G23 for example. What does G23 look like? So 2 is green and 3 is red, right? So, so the green and red edges are exactly the top quadrilateral that I've drawn and the bottom quadrilateral that I am drawing now, right? We have removed the blue edges and that gives us the graph G23. Okay. So this graph is two-face colorable. In other words, I can give two colors to the faces and get a proper two-face coloring of this graph, right? So for example, there are only three faces here. I could give the color 0 here, then I would have to give the color 1 here, and then I would give the color 0 here, right? Fair enough?
So basically, every bounded face will get the same color, and there will be only unbounded face that will
Hmm.
get a different color.
I wouldn't jump to that conclusion. You see, you could have a more complicated situation where you have basically it's a bunch of cycles, right? So
Yeah.
you could have like cycles like this, in which case you will have to alternate 0, 1, 0, right? So you can't say that all bounded faces have the same color, and you will have to give one here.
Okay. Since okay. So basically, it will depend on the pair embedding.
Right, right, exactly. The point is that you can give two colors, right?
Yeah, we can give two
Okay, by
colors.
the do-it-yourself problem that we haven't proved, but that was supposed to be done by you. If you were stuck at that, we can discuss it at the end of this. But right now, for now, believe the do-it-yourself problem.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
and then we can discuss that further if it's required. Okay, so we have a proper two-phase coloring of any of these graphs G12, G23, and G13. But we only need two of them. So consider um, proper two-phase colorings of two of these graphs. Let's say I take G12 and G23. Okay, so the blue-green graph and the green-red graph. So, and we will consider the colors as, um, so this is going to be a function which takes a face of G12 and gives it a color 0 or 1. Okay, and this is going to be a function that takes a face of G23 and gives it a color 0 or 1. Okay,
So I think you have made the labeling same. It will be small f and small g because two different functions.
yeah, yeah, good point. Let me not even give them labels, right? It's a function from, I won't give the function a labeling. Right? Okay,
Okay.
good.
Okay. Fine.
All right. Okay. So now, using these two proper two face colorings, we want to get a, we're going to combine these in some way to get a four face coloring of the whole graph G, right? And then we will argue that it is a proper four face coloring. Okay. So how do we combine these two colorings? Any guesses?
Every face of G is basically intersection of the face of the two grasses,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Observation. Right. Each face of G is the intersection of some face of G12 and some face of G23. This requires a mild degree of imagination. Let me help you. Supposing you look at a face of the graph G. Okay, let's say this is our graph G. So some edges will be red, some will be blue, some will be green. I don't know which one looks like what. Let me just make some arbitrary assignment. Let's say this is red. The next one cannot be red, so it will be blue or green. Let's say now I have another red edge. And now let's say I have a green edge. Okay, and let's say now I have a blue edge. And now I have to have a green edge. Okay, something like this. Okay, let's say I'm looking at the graph G. So now let me draw the other edges. So here I will have a green edge. Here I will have a blue and red, green again, green and red. So now I will have a blue edge coming out.
Sir, can you scroll up a bit?
Yeah, give me
Just
one
the
second.
observation. I just want to see the observation.
Yeah.
So here, when you are saying that each face of G is the intersection of some face of G12 and some face of G23. So what do you mean by intersection?
Yeah, we'll look at it. Give me one second.
Okay,
I
okay.
mean topologically, right?
Topology.
So face is simply a set of points, right? So in that sense.
Okay, okay.
Okay. So now let us look at this particular drawing here. I just want to convince you about this observation, right? So what does it mean? Supposing you look at this face in the graph G, okay? In one of the two graphs, G12, you are removing all the red edges, right? To remind you, G12 is blue and green, and G23 is green and red. Okay? So in the graph G12, you're basically throwing away the red colored edges. Okay? So, which means you are throwing away this edge, right? And now what will happen? In this graph G12, you will have a face that will contain the face F, and it will contain some stuff outside because you have removed the red colored edges. Right? In the other graph G23, you are throwing away the blue edges. So which means you are throwing away this edge and you are throwing away this edge. Okay, so you will have a face in G23 that contains F, and it is extended on this side because you have removed the blue edges, right? I don't know what it looks like. The point is, if you take the intersection of these two, the first face in G12 and the face in G23, right? Then you will get exactly the face F. Observe that F is the intersection of some face F12 of the graph G12 and some face F23, which is a face of G23.
But I have a question
Yeah.
regarding this figure.
Yeah.
So what is the graph G exactly? It is a six cycle.
No, the graph G is whatever it is. I have just drawn one face of it, right? I want to just convince you that if you look at any face of this graph, it is the intersection of some face of G12 and some face of G23, right? I'm not drawing the whole graph here. I just want to convince you of this observation. So I'm just magnifying at one particular face of the graph.
Okay, so basically that particular phase is small f, which you have labeled.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
And the edges are basically which you have marked as follow blue, green, and red.
Right, right. The edges are going to be colored with one of the three colors. So I have chosen some arbitrary coloring.
Okay, but it is not clear to me why small f equal to f1 to intersection f23.
Okay, think about it. So what is F12? F12 contains F, and we have removed the red colored edges. So this is part of F12. This is part of F12, whatever it is. And this is part of F23, and this is part of F23. Right?
Okay,
But F is contained in both of them. So this part that you see here, it is contained in F12 and it is also contained in F23.
okay,
Right? So what happens in this particular figure if you take the intersection?
okay, okay.
Right? So I want you to convince yourself of this more generally, that this is not just for this figure, in general, because what are you doing? In one case, you are dropping the red colored edges in the graph
Yes,
G12,
yes, yes. Yes.
right? In the other case, you are dropping the blue colored edges in G23. So your faces will become bigger, right? But whatever will be included in the first face F12 will not be included in F23, except for the common intersection, which is the face F itself.
So,
Yeah,
sir,
Krishna? Yeah.
yeah. Will the intersection of two faces in G12 and G23 be a face in G?
The intersection of any two faces, will it be a face you're asking?
Yeah,
Well,
it might be empty, but if it's not, like,
right. If it is empty, that is one possibility. Otherwise, you will get a face of G. That's right.
okay,
That's right.
okay, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sir, I have a question. So how
Hmm.
do you know that F is precisely this intersection? Means there may be some portions.
Okay. Think about it this way. Let me give you a different way of thinking about it. Think about it per edge. For every edge here that I've drawn, so I'm looking at the face F, right? The edge has two sides. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. So
F.
now in one of the graphs, if the edge is a red colored edge, then if you look at the other side, it will be part of a particular face of G12,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Which contains the face F because we are removing this edge. So if you remove this edge, then on both sides you will have the same face, right?
Yeah.
But in the other graph, G23, there will be two different faces. Because remember, these graphs don't have any cut edges. Another observation that is worth making is these two graphs have no cut edges, right?
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yes.
which means that for a red colored edge, if you are looking at the graph blue green, right? If you're looking at the graph G23, which is the green red graph, right? Then for a red colored edge, you will have two different faces on the two sides because it is not a cut edge.
Okay.
Does that
Got it.
make
Got it.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Got it.
So
Got it.
the one side will be contained in a particular face of G12, but then it will not be contained in the corresponding face in G23. Right? So you can argue about it for each edge if you are not convinced.
Okay. I got it. Got it.
Yeah. So if
Sir, I had a question.
go ahead, Raja.
It, I guess it may not be equal to, right? Means F may be like F is contained in F12 intersection F23.
Hmm.
It may not be equal to. Uh,
Okay. Well, here is the idea. For the face F, right? So take a face of the graph G. Okay. This face, do you agree that it is contained in some face of the graph G12,
yeah, yeah, sure.
right? Because you're removing edges, so faces can only become bigger. They basically merge, right? So F is contained in some face F12 of the graph G12. Similarly, F is contained in some face F23 of G23. Now my claim is that actually F is the intersection of these two,
Okay.
right? So what is probably easier to see is that F is contained in F12 intersection F23 because I choose F12 and F23 in such a way that they contain the face F, right?
Yes,
And
sir.
now I have to argue that this is actually equality.
So you can think like the think of the edges like gates means at one point of time you are removing the gates of one color and then
Right.
closing it and removing the gates of another color.
Right. That's a very good
That
analogy
might
to think
help you
about.
visualize a bit.
Right, right. That's a good analogy. Think of these as gates. Right. That's a good way to think about it.
So for a given face small f, this choice of F12 and F23 need not be unique.
It is unique.
It is unique.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Think about it this way, what I just said. Look at a face F in the graph G. This face is contained in a unique face F12 of the graph G12, right?
Yes.
It has
Yes.
to
Yes.
be unique because the faces are well defined,
Exactly.
right? So it is contained in a unique face F12 of G12. Similarly, it is contained in a unique face F23 of G23. Now I claim that it is actually the intersection of these two faces,
Okay, okay,
right? And now to think about why it is equal to the intersection, what Kapil said, thinking about them as gates is a good way to visualize it.
okay, okay, okay.
In fact, that is kind of what I was trying to get through this diagram. You open the red gates, you will get a certain face. You open the blue gates, you will get a certain face. Right?
Okay. So by opening gates, we mean we are
Remove.
simply removing the edge at a point of time and again
Exactly.
adding the edge at some point of time.
Right, removing all those edges at one time. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I think means his analog is better.
yeah.
Visualize,
Good,
visualize. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
good, good. All right. Okay. So each face. So this is a key observation, right? This is really crucial because now what I can do is for every face of the graph G, I will give it a color which will be an ordered pair. Well, I'll give the color of F12, comma, the color of F23. So,
I think sir
color,
now sir, as you define, it is quite clear why it will be proper coloring.
exactly. So, the color of F is going to be defined as the
Because sir,
color,
for a given face f of g, the choice of f12 and f23 is unique.
exactly,
So the ordered pair we are assigning to f as its color must be unique,
exactly,
and it
exactly.
cannot be same for two distinct faces basically.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So basically the ordered pair. So basically we are assigning an ordered pair to f as its color,
Right,
and that ordered pair depends on the choice of f12 and f23,
right.
and the choice of f12 and f23 is unique for a given
It's
face f.
unique. Exactly,
So if we take two distinct faces f and g in the graph G, their color must be different. Not
exactly.
distinct faces. I mean they share a common boundary.
Yeah, share a common boundary, right.
Then their colors must be different. So then it will be proper face coloring. Means proper four face coloring rather.
Right. So I still want to argue the properness once more, but first let's just make sure that this is a four-face coloring, right? So for every face F, I'm giving it a color based on our above discussion, right? Because this face F12 gets a color 0 or 1 in the graph G12, and this face F23 will again get a color 0 or 1, right? Because we had chosen colorings of these two graphs, right? So this ordered pair belongs to 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. These are our four colors, right? Clearly, this is a four-face coloring of the graph G, right? And it is well defined because for each face F, it is the intersection of a unique face of G12 and a unique face of G23. So there is no ambiguity in the definition of the coloring. Now we need to argue why it is proper. Why is it proper? Okay. Any questions so far regarding how the coloring is given? Right. So just to maybe we should complete this example. So let's say I look at G12. So what is the graph G12? We are taking the blue and green edges, but we are dropping the red colored edges. And the blue and green edges in this example, they form a Hamiltonian cycle. Right. So what are the blue and green? Okay, I go like this. I go like this. I go like this. Then I go like this. Then I go this way, this way, this way, this way. Okay. So this is the graph G12. Okay. Let's do a two coloring of this. So this would be color 0 and this could be color 1. There are only two faces. Okay. Now for every face in the original graph, we will take the intersection of some face of this graph and some face of the other graph, right? This is uniquely defined. So if you look at this face here, it is the intersection of this face and the intersection of this face. So it will be 0, comma 0. Okay. Now if you look at this face, it is the intersection of this face and this face. Okay. And so
So
it will be, yeah,
the
go ahead.
unbounded face of G is the intersection of the same faces of G21 and G12, right?
The unbounded face of G is the intersection of the same face of, sorry, can you repeat that?
Means the one you did just now, the 1,
Right.
comma 1 in G,
Uh-huh.
it is the intersection of the unbounded face of G23 and G12, right?
Right.
And the unbounded face of G is intersection of G12 and G23 as well, right?
Uh-huh. Give me a second. Um,
So what he's saying is that the unbounded face of G is the intersection of unbounded face of G12 and the unbounded face of G23.
right, right. Uh-huh, that is correct.
But then we can't have the equality. Means as you said, F is equal to F12 intersection F23.
I see. So if I take the intersection of,
No. But why can we take the intersection? It's not clear to me.
right, give me a second. So if you take the intersection of these two faces, let's say, so we are taking the unbounded face here and the unbounded face here, right? Okay. So we will get in the intersection whatever is here, okay, and then we'll also get the intersection.
No, sir. I think what he is trying to say is that you have taken a face in G which you have marked as star
Right, right,
into and that face into is basically the intersection of the unbounded faces of G12 and G23.
right. That's right.
So on the similarly, you can take the unbounded face of G, and it will
Mhm.
also be the intersection of the unbounded faces of G12 and G23.
Hmm.
So
Right.
I think that he is trying to make his point more clearer. I think it can happen because for a given face, if the choice is unique, it doesn't imply that two distinct faces cannot have the same choice.
Hmm. Hmm.
So indeed, it may happen. Means I think that he is trying to make this point.
I see. Yes, I'm trying to think what is right. So what is happening if I take the unbounded faces of G12 and G23 and I take their intersection, I get this middle square, right? Because that is contained in both of them. And then I get, right, I see, right. And then I also get the, uh-huh, I also get the outside. Right. So I think there is a point. Then it means,
I think F equal to F12 intersection F23 intersection F31 or something.
sorry, can you repeat?
I think a face may be F12 intersection F23 intersection F31.
Right. Then we'll be looking at three things at a time. Right. That's a good point. Um, right.
No, but so how? What is the problem arising?
Yeah, I think
No.
here it
So,
should be, yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think here even if F is subset of F12 intersection F23, we can proceed and we
Right.
just,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So I think that is a good point that actually I also have misled myself into believing that this is equality. What is clear is that it is a proper subset. What is
Yeah,
not
that's
clear
yeah, that is
is
what
that
I
it's an
was trying to
equation because it's not does not seem to be an equation, right? If I intersect the two faces, there are two unbounded faces of G212 and G23 in this example, then the intersection of those two faces contains this stuff and it also contains this stuff. right? So in this example, if this is my face F12 and this is my face F23, then the intersection of F12 and F23 is actually the union of two things. It is the union of F and F prime. Can everybody verify this?
Okay, I see. I see. So
Right.
basically, so what we can say, F is subset of F1 to union F2 3.
Right, right, exactly. So yeah, right. So let me correct myself. That seems to be a misleading statement. What we do know is that it has to be contained in a face of, yeah, that part is clear, right? Each face in the original graph, it has to be contained in some face in G12 because you're removing some edges, so that face will become bigger. And similarly, it will be contained in a unique face of G23, right? So that part is clear. What is not true, as is demonstrated in this example, is that it is actually the intersection of these two. Okay? It doesn't have to be equal. So that is actually incorrect.
So actually,
Thank you.
this happens only for unbounded faces, I believe.
Now that would be good to investigate, but right now I'm a little bit skeptical of these drawings. Right? They are misleading. But yeah, is it true only for the unbounded face, or can it also happen for the
No,
other
I
face?
don't think so.
No, the faces on the side of that one face, they're also. How will you get those?
Right, I see. So you're saying these two faces.
Yeah, I think the important point is they are edge
I mean,
disjoint.
yeah, one face have to be unbounded for this anomaly to happen.
Sorry, can you repeat?
I mean, for this anomaly to happen, one face have to be unbounded. Like either
No,
F12 or F23 has to be unbounded. If
I
both are
see.
bounded, then this anomaly won't happen.
I see. Okay, fair enough.
Faces you have marked in the drawing. How will you get those then?
No,
So
by
that is what he's saying. That you'll get it by intersecting one unbounded face in one of the two graphs and a bounded face in the other graph.
but how can we definitely say that the anomaly is going to happen only in the case of unbounded?
It requires a proof. I agree. We don't know right now. We don't know anything for sure. So what Kapil is saying requires a proof. Good news is we don't need it for the discussion. So we just need for the time being that it is actually contained in the intersection of unique faces of G12 and G23. Okay. So I will just put a remark here. F equal to F12 intersection F23, not necessary. Okay, so that was a false statement. Okay, but that's okay because what we need is a well defined way of defining the coloring, right? And this is well defined. Yeah, go ahead, Krishna.
Also, we need to make sure that the faces which are inside F12 intersection F23 are edge disjoint, right?
Can you repeat that?
The faces inside F12 and F23,
Hmm.
they are edge disjoint.
Edge disjoint. In what sense? So, right. So let's go to this example. Can you explain what you mean?
Example here, the two faces that we found are the box, the F face and the F dash face.
Uh-huh.
Like both of them are edge disjoint in the sense that
They don't have
example,
any common boundary
yeah,
edges.
if they actually had a common boundary or edge, then they would actually receive the same coloring of color of F12 comma F23, which
Right.
would be a contradiction. Like we shouldn't have that, right?
Right, right. Yeah. But we will argue the proper coloring in a bit.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
sure. Okay.
Right. So far we haven't discussed why this is a proper coloring, right? All I want to tell you The important part is that we have a well-defined way of giving the colors, right? And that well-definedness comes from simply this subset relationship. Every face is the intersection, is contained in the intersection of a unique face of G12 and a unique face of G23. So based on these two faces, F12 and F23, I can give a color to the face F, right? Okay.
So actually here the uniqueness of F12 and F23 is mandatory for the coloring to be well defined.
Right. I want it to be well defined. I don't want there to be any ambiguity in our definition of the coloring. Right? Okay. So we have a four-phase coloring of the graph G. So this was a really good discussion. Thanks. I hadn't noticed that this was a proper subset and not necessarily an equality. So that's good. All right. So why is it proper? So here is the reason for why it is proper. Consider any edge of the graph, right? Consider any edge E of the graph G. Okay, this edge could be blue, green, or red, right? Now, what happens if it is a, remember, we looked at G12 and G23, right? So we looked at the blue-green graph and the green-red graph. Okay, so there are two cases I need to consider. Either the edge is green because green is in both of these graphs, or the edge is blue, in which case it is symmetric because blue is in one of the graphs and the other graph has red. So if it is a blue or red edge, okay, if it is a blue or red edge, in that case, if you look at the two sides, so I want to convince you that for every edge, the colors on the two sides are different, right? That means that it is a proper face coloring. So if you look at the two sides, they will be different faces in the graph G12 because it is a blue colored edge. So that edge will be in the graph G12. If E is blue or red, then the two sides of E, right, are colored differently in the graph G12 in the case of blue or in the graph G23 in the case of red edges, right? Which means when I look at the final coloring,
Basically in either case, exactly one of G12 or G23 will be colored differently. Means two sides of you will be colored differently.
exactly, which means the ordered pair I defined here will be different in that coordinate, right? So in our coloring of G, the ordered pairs will differ in at least one coordinate. Right? If it is a blue edge, then they will definitely differ in the first coordinate, which is taken from the graph G12. And if it is a red edge, then they will definitely differ in the second coordinate. Does everybody agree? And if it is a green edge, well, if it is a green edge, then it actually appears in both the graphs, in G12 and in G23. And so the colors will be different in both of them. So they will actually differ in both coordinates. Right? If E is green, then the ordered pairs will differ in both coordinates. So in all three possibilities, you will have different colors on the two sides of the given edge. Because this is true for every single edge of the graph, it means that any two adjacent faces get different colors.
Okay, so if he is green, then you know that that edge is part of both G12 and G23,
Right.
and on both sides of the edge we will get to different faces in both
Different
of
colors.
G12 and
Right.
G23, different colors, and we know that in G12 we have proper two face coloring,
Right.
and in G23 we have proper two face coloring. So using these two component coordinates, we can say that those two colors will be different. They must be
Right.
different for each of G12 and G23, and then
Right.
we can say that for G it will be different.
Exactly. Right. Okay. Are there any? I mean, is this quite clear? This is crucial, right? We need it to be a proper coloring. Thus, we have a proper four face coloring of the graph G. Okay. Any questions or concerns? Right. So what I would suggest is complete this example yourself. Right. So give colors to all the faces here the way we did, and check that it is a proper four face coloring. So do it yourself. Complete this example and verify that what you get is a proper face coloring, proper four face coloring. Okay. All right. So I just want to take 2, 3 more minutes, and then we are going to have a week-long holiday. So just hang on for a few minutes. So this conjecture, as we discussed yesterday, is equivalent to the four-color conjecture due to Tate's theorem that we just proved. Right. So this is a conjecture, well, now a theorem because it is equivalent to four color conjecture, which we know is a theorem. So this is a theorem as well, right? 11.5. So this is the edge coloring version of the four color theorem. I think in Bondi Murthy they don't say simple because simple is probably implied by three connected in this case. Three connected cubic graph will necessarily be simple. You can check that. Okay. Unless it's a very small graph, 1, 2, or 4 vertices, in which case it is not interesting. Okay. The advantage of this conjecture, just like the vertex coloring case, is that you don't need a plane graph. You can talk about planar graphs because it is about edge colorings and not about face colorings. Okay. So you might as well say planar graph, right? So Tate proved this equivalence, and this is correct. This is a correct equivalence. What's the problem? Once Tate had this equivalence, Tate made some incorrect conclusions and concluded that he had proved the four color theorem. So I want to tell you a bit about that Tate's misadventure there. Um, so what he actually convinced himself is that any such graph has a Hamiltonian cycle, a cycle that goes through all the vertices. So this is a false conjecture.
Sir, I think Tart gave a counterexample.
That's right. Tate's conjecture, which is
Then in fact
false.
means I saw the counterexample of Tart. It is means really big. Means he
Right.
constructed a graph
Exactly.
on 20 vertices or something like that, which is three connected simple cubic but not Hamiltonian.
Yeah, it's a 46 vertex graph. So
Yeah, yeah.
Tate, right.
It's a
So
46 vertex
Tate
graph. Yeah.
conjectured that every cubic three connected planar graph is Hamiltonian, right? Which means it has a Hamiltonian cycle. What is a Hamiltonian cycle?
So
It is also
why are you calling it conjecture? Because at that time Tate proved this statement.
right. So Tate basically said that this is true, right? Tate said that this is self-evident, but it's not self-evident. In fact, it is a false statement, right? So that's why I'm saying it is a conjecture because it was. I mean, if you look on Wikipedia, it's called Tate's conjecture, and it also says that it's a false conjecture, right? So it's called conjecture for historical reasons, right?
Okay.
So you can call it Tate's false conjecture if you want to be precise.
So basically, did he try to prove this statement that
No,
everything?
he took it as self-evident. Tate took it as self-evident.
So what do you mean by self-evident?
He said this was obviously true, and it is obviously not true, as Tutt demonstrated in 1946. Right? It's a kind of mistake one tends to also make in assignments. Right? So Tate was human after all, so he made a mistake, saying that this is obviously true, and it is obviously not true, as Tutt demonstrated in 1946. Tutt constructed a counter example on 46 vertices. So why did Tate make this conjecture? Why did Tate make this false statement? Well, you see, if the graph is Hamiltonian, then it implies that it has three perfect matchings. Can anybody tell me why? If the graph is Hamiltonian, then it definitely has three perfect matchings.
So if the graph is Hamiltonian, we can say that it has two perfect matchings, which are subset of the Hamiltonian cycle.
Exactly. Exactly.
And the third perfect matching we can simply do it since the graph is three regular. We
Right.
can if we remove the Hamiltonian cycle from the graph G, the edges of the Hamiltonian cycle, the remaining graph will be one regular.
Exactly.
Which is the third
Exactly.
perfect matching. Yeah.
Exactly. So if Tate's conjecture was true, then it would imply that the graph has three disjoint perfect matchings because you take your Hamiltonian cycle. So let's say your graph has 8 vertices for the sake of example. So this is one perfect matching. This is a second perfect matching. And now you remove all these edges because the original graph is 3 regular and because you've removed 2 edges at each vertex, what will remain will be a 1 regular graph spanning, right? Because every vertex has degree exactly 3. So when you remove all these edges, what remains is a third perfect matching, which will basically be chords like this, something like this. Okay?
But sir, but is the converse true?
No, no, the converse is not true. So this is a stronger statement. So what people often do is to prove something, they make a stronger statement, but then Tate made a stronger statement and said that this is obviously true, which is the mistake, right? So if this was true, then clearly he would have proved the four color theorem. But the fact that this statement is not even true was demonstrated by Tutt in 1946, right? So not only is Tate's proof incorrect, his approach to prove the four color theorem is also incorrect because it relies on this false conjecture, right?
Okay, so assuming this false conjecture, he proved the remaining thing.
Right. Assuming this false conjecture, it is done, right? I mean, I just convinced you. In fact, you convinced me. I did not convince you, right? If this is true, then you have three disjoint perfect matchings,
Okay,
and that
yeah.
is equivalent to proving the four color
Yeah,
theorem, right?
Then it is stage colorable because if there are three distant permanent, it is stage colorable. We
That
are
is
done.
exactly three edge colorability, right? Three
We are done.
disjoint perfect matchings mean three edge colorable.
Okay.
Okay.
But what he said, what Tate said as self-evident, that is wrong. The conjecture
Right.
is false. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. So just one more statement I want to make. So
But
this
sir,
statement, yeah, go
I
ahead.
have a question. How
Yeah.
did Tate came up with such a counter example?
Oh, there is a beautiful story behind it. Tutt has written an article on it. If I can find it, I will share it with all of you. But Tutt basically explains how he came up with the 46 vertex counter example. Now there are smaller counter examples, I think on 38 vertices or 36 or something. But back then, this was the only counter example.
Okay.
Okay. So there is a very beautiful story about Tut's discovery of this counterexample, because as you can imagine, it's not easy to construct a counterexample on 46 vertices.
Yeah, it is.
And it is also a good example of why by checking a few examples you should not jump to conclusions, because there might be a counterexample on, I don't know, 100 vertices, right?
Okay.
So it's a very
Basically,
beautiful
I have
story.
seen this graph in the Bondi Murti.
Yeah, it is there. Yeah,
It
the
is
graph
there,
is
yeah.
there in Bondi Murti. Yeah.
And in fact, it is called Tart graph. Means in his
Tut
name.
graph. Yeah,
Tart
yeah.
graph. Yeah, yeah, his name.
Tut graph.
Sir,
Okay.
can you share the link? The beautiful story of Tart.
If I find it, I will share it. I will have to look for it.
Okay, okay.
I just want to make one last statement. I want to tell you about a beautiful conjecture. So, while Tate's conjecture is false, Barnett said that it is true for bipartite graphs. So, this is an open conjecture in graph theory. Barnett's conjecture. You can read more about it on Wikipedia. Every three connected planar cubic bipartite graph, because all the counterexamples to Tate's conjecture are non-bipartite. So if you add bipartite, then it is Hamiltonian.
So basically, Tart's counterexample to Tate's evidence is basically non-Hamiltonian. Is non-bipartite.
Non-bipartite. Right.
Non-bipartite. It means the
Okay.
graph on 46 vertices constructed by Tart is not bipartite.
Right. Not only that, but every single counterexample we know till today is non-bipartite. Therefore, Barnett made this conjecture that is still open. Right. So neither do we have a counterexample, nor do we know how to prove it. Right. Okay. So that's it. That's it for today. I'm sorry going 10 minutes over the time. The next lecture will be on Thursday, 1 week later at 10 o'clock, exactly at this time.
Means at this time means at 10 o'clock, right?
At 10 o'clock. Right now is 10 o'clock.
Okay. At 10 o'clock, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
because I think it is 9 o'clock, not 10 o'clock. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, if there are any questions or concerns, please shoot. I'll stop recording now.
So basically, these